Hi Talita, well thank you very much for inviting us here today. It's great to be here, great to be in Farnborough. One thing that I'd like to ask you, obviously in your role as CFO, one of the challenges I think for many CFOs is identifying where they should invest the company money, you know? And do you find that difficult? How do you cope with that?
I think it's always really important to have a real opinion around the strategy and the investment decisions linked to those. So the strategy really is the lead in that regard. I think you have to align the investments and say they really have to fit to the strategy, and also then to the risk appetite that's been set by a board, because you could get incongruence between those. And for instance, when we decided to do this campus and bring 3 organizations that aren't production related onto one campus, it was with the vision to have a seamless movement of talent. So we decided to invest our money in refurbing a campus for 3 companies, and then to really change the underlying culture as well, and spend the money on making sure that we would have very engaged employees, and that we would have cultural events, and redefine the culture and create a personality behind that. So everything was really aligned to that vision and that strategy that we wanted for the campus. So I think in that way it's really good to have a strategy-led investment decision.
It's interesting that you mention sort of employee engagement and that movement of talent. Often for finance professionals, they're always associated with numbers. But you have HR report to you. People is a big part of your role. Is it difficult to sometimes justify investing in people because it's maybe not as closely linked to the financials?
I think when we look from a company-wide strategy perspective again, we really have 3 things that we should focus on. We should focus on having amazing products around us, which you can see, and really having something that delights the customer and getting to the customer and serving the customer. And then the third thing that we sometimes forget is the people. And it's really important to make sure in anything very strategic that your people are really aligned. If I can just think about the motor industry at the moment, in the next 10 years we'll be faced with autonomous driving. And the change will be so rapid if it happens in 10 years that we really need to make sure that the processes and the people are really aligned to that phenomenal front-end technological shift. And therefore it's really important to invest in the people. It's important for leaders to understand the strategy, where you're going with the strategy, and then to take their teams along on that strategy journey. And sometimes you just need to invest in people to really make the leadership feel like they're part of the journey, and that they can motivate their teams to also be part of that journey and to understand the strategy. So I think it's totally valid that we have to invest in people, and strategies can fail when we don't.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting, obviously, if you think specifically about, say, people development, or even stepping away from people and things like branding as well, they're very difficult to show a direct return on investment. So how do you tackle that?
I think it's really important to sometimes define really numerical KPIs, or even have softer KPIs, for instance, to determine that. So for instance, in the cultural change program that we've done, it was really important to see whether we were moving forward and whether we were really getting the bang for our buck. And so what we did is we really defined 5 cultural shifts, and we even asked every quarter, we ask 18 questions in those 5 cultural shifts, and people answer them. There are a couple of answers that they can choose from, and then we can really see, are we moving forward or aren't we moving forward? And that shows you in a less tangible way, because there's no real numbers behind it, but it's still showing you whether you're statistically moving forward. So it really depends on what you're measuring. For instance, employee engagement, University of Bath has done a really good study on that. They say that companies with very engaged people are 2.5 times higher than what it would normally be if the employees are not engaged. Also, you have things like sick days that might reduce, or if you're in a plant environment, health and safety incidents. The incidence of those might reduce significantly if you have really engaged employees. So I just think it's about finding what it is that really drives what you want to measure, and then still measuring it to determine, are we really moving forward? And maybe sometimes it's not really in a pound amount of a return on investment, but it's in a different way that you can measure it. So I often get asked about cultural change and can you really measure that? And I think you really can do. There are very important engagement studies. There's a Hay survey which can measure how engaged your people are and how empowered your people are to really do their jobs or move things forward. So it's really, there are statistical measures around at the moment. It just depends on what it is you want to measure and how aligned that is to the purpose of what you're driving.
So at BMW, obviously it's a great brand, very successful business, but what strategies do you have in place to sort of remain on top and stay competitive?
This year we celebrated our 100th year anniversary, our centenary.
Congratulations.
And thank you very much. And we're busy with the strategy for the next 100 years, and it's called Next 100. And we're really looking at that competitive advantage, and we feel it's all around emotional products and really competitive services that we offer our customers, and at the same time using things like digitalization, innovative technologies and sustainability to really give the customer a unique advantage.
For these next 100 years, then, what is the importance of leadership in order to sort of drive this strategy?
We've also looked at, in terms of the strategy, in terms of culture, and what an important role the culture really plays. Because if you don't look at the culture in relation to the strategy, you could really be missing a trick. It's again about the alignment we spoke about before, getting the people behind the strategy and getting them to understand that strategy. And it's really important to define, are the values that we had before still relevant? Do we need other values? So we've defined five values in terms of this process. And what leaders now have to do is role model those values to their teams and show that they are really engaged with those values. And then the values really underpin the strategy and underpin the behaviors that we need every day and how processes should be optimized and how things should be working within the company. So it's really important that culture is a pivotal part of it, and leaders role model those values and the culture every day.
Finally, for business leaders across all functions, what kind of advice would you give them to succeed, basically?
I believe that the change in the next few years, next 10, 15 years will be phenomenal. And I think what I very often see is that people see change not as an opportunity, but as a threat. So I would really say embrace change as an opportunity. What we did here is we used this process of moving to this new campus, which was just a relocation, as an opportunity to actually change the underlying culture and bring the organizations closer together. So that was a real opportunity, and it's been very successful. And then the other thing that I would say is really be very authentic in everything you do. People trust you when they can understand who you are and they can believe in you. It's really important to be authentic and also to allow people to be who they are and be the best that they can possibly be, and bring that into the environment to ensure that they are creative and inspired every day.